This is football. I am Kevin Clark. Guys, first of all, if you're listening just the audio version, I went to the Ryder Cup and I'm wearing the most like bozo tool Ryder Cup Bethpage black hoodie you can possibly imagine. Okay, suburban dad, quilted, light blue look. Right now it is unintentional. I threw it on. It's very comfortable. But yes, I did go to the Ryder Cup 20-second review of that whole ordeal. First of all, that's what you're going to get. If you're anywhere in the New York area, you're going to get, well, I'm going to get 20 seconds on what it was like at the Ryder Cup because it was just a kind of an industry event. Amazing experience, but just as an experience. So on Friday morning, they're playing alternate shot. There's no balls in the air. Like it's hard to see shots because they're playing these holes really quickly. So we're like underwater trying to just catch up with these groups. We just sit at 11 green and then we just watch them come through really quick. And then we're like, oh, okay, that's cool. But like you can't actually see like a full golf shot into the result. That is not something that happens at the Ryder Cup, nor is it really anything that happens in any crowded golf tournament. So then the second 18 in the afternoon, we just walked along the golfers, the Scotties, the Bryson DeChambeaus, and all that stuff, and you get to see them hit full fairway shots, but you don't see the result. And so there's just too many people to actually see what's happening at the Ryder Cup. It's like some other events. F1 is not a million miles from this. The worst place to actually follow it is 20 feet away from where it's happening. It's a TV product. Having said that, did I drink a lot of beers to clean out the merch tent? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. So let's talk about football. It was interesting to me. I think sometimes a lot about like how much we read into one little thing, we extrapolate it, and then our moods are dictated by this, or the way we view a coach, the way we view a quarterback, the way we view a franchise in a town. And I just saw a quote from Josh Blackwell, who was the Bears player who blocked the final kick with the Raiders against the Raiders. And he said that his own long snapper, Scott Daly, told Blackwell that the Raiders long snapper always moved the ball right before the snap. So you can time the snap. Okay. So then Blackwell blocks it. He'd almost done it earlier in the game. So if he'd done it then, he wouldn't be able to do it, presumably, in the fourth quarter, although who knows how bad this long snapper is. But the point I'm making here is like, we think so much about these end of game sequences. Like all it takes sometimes, the difference between the Bears having no momentum off of last week and then everybody saying, here comes the Bears, is a long snapper who you did not know his name until 15 seconds ago when I said it. Again, I'm going to say it again. His name is Scott Daly, the Bears long snapper. Did he just save the Bears season? Maybe, but it's just very funny to me. And I'm guilty of it too. We take one little event and we say, oh, here they come. And it's because of backup long, or because the long snapper noticed something. All right. So to that end, because apparently the Raiders have an answer and it's the long snapper tipping pitches. To that end, I put out on Twitter tonight, I said, we're a month into the season. We're a quarter of the way into the season, essentially. With 17th game, we haven't really worked that out. But what is the team's flaw that you root for that you just did not see coming? Didn't see it coming. Raiders, we know what it is. It's also maybe the offensive line and Geno Smith turning the ball over. But they could have won that game even with those things had the long snapper done his job. Having said that, the number one answer I got a lot, and I'm going to go through them, but I got a lot of people saying Eagles run game. Again, a flaw you did not see coming. I saw a couple people say Andy Reid's play calling, but I think that's been quieted down today. That's old news. That's fake news. The biggest one that stood out was people saying Ravens coaching. And that's what I want to talk about today because it's going to be the story of the week. What do the Ravens do? And you see this a little bit, although it's completely different circumstances, with Penn State over the weekend. They lose to Oregon, and everybody says, well, we have to move on from James Franklin. He can't win the big one. Well, he wins a lot of little and medium and almost big ones. In fact, he got to the Big Ten championship game. But with John Harbaugh, kind of a similar thing. And I want to say that the overarching line, I think, that is the most important thing about John Harbaugh. It's Cormac McCarthy line. I believe it is, you have no idea what worse luck your bad luck has saved you from. All right? Think about that. Internalize it, process it. The reason I think it applies here, and it applies to every single coach who hasn't reached. So John Harbaugh has won a Super Bowl, but he hasn't won it with this core, who hasn't maximized their core to the best of their ability, right? So there's only a few guys who are not in that grouping, right? But if you're consistently, so Sean McDermott is in the same bucket as John Harbaugh, right? I would say that they're the two. I mean, like Zach Taylor probably wishes he was in that bucket. He's not in that bucket. He might be in bigger trouble depending on how Mike Brown feels about moving on from a guy who maybe is still owed money. Mike Brown typically doesn't like that, but this is not a Zach Taylor thing. What it is, though, is it's a John Harbaugh thing where they wrote up on the board, as Kyle Hamilton told the show a couple weeks ago, they wrote up on the board suddenly, then gradually. And they meant, it's a slow build and then bam, bam. It's gradually, then suddenly, excuse me. Gradually, slow build, slow build, slow build, slow build, bam, all of a sudden you've won the Super Bowl. Bang. And it's over. What do they call it? Sometimes like the 30-year overnight success. The Ravens would be the 5-year, 6-year, 7-year overnight success. That's how it goes, right? That's what they were planning on. Instead, all hell breaks loose. They've looked bad, but I don't know. And I'm going to go through the flaws in a second. I don't know how you cope now at 1-3 with Ronnie Stanley leaves the game. Marlon Humphrey leaves the game. Roquan Smith leaves the game. Lamar Jackson leaves the game with a hamstring injury that I don't know. He'll get more tests. We'll see how severe that is. That determines the season right there. Nate Wiggins comes out of the game. And so to me, this is season from hell, as our friend Bill Simmons likes to say. But then combined with the fact that like you're going to take, if you're going to say John Harbaugh should be fired, I'm not going to say that because you're basing it on a 3-game sample, 4-game sample of really wonky football, and then the entire team gets hurt. So here are the problems. Okay, Zach Orr, the defensive play caller, the adjustments he made last year seemed to be the outlier. So he deployed Kyle Hamilton in a different way for the back half last year. They become the best defense in football. They draft Malachi Starks. I think, okay, here we go. Malachi Starks, going to be some positional flexibility here with those two, with Hamilton and Malachi Starks. Great things are going to happen back there. Has not happened. In fact, the reason they're not as good as they were, besides some of the play calling, is can't stop the run, can't tackle. Okay. And those were known knowns for me. I thought they were going to be fine at both of those things. They had through going into this game, they had one of the worst rushing success rates allowed, like on record, like ever, like in the history of analytics, history of numbers. And they were missing tackles, I think the second most clip in the entire NFL when they've been one of the best tackling teams the last 2 years. So Zach Orr seems like the improvements he made last year, that was the fluke, not the other way around. Do they make a move? Did Chuck Pagano's already on staff? Do they just say, screw it, let's just try to save the season? Or do they say, hey, we're not going to freak out because it's an injury? I don't know the answer to that. But then Derrick Henry starts fumbling. Yeah, okay. That's a low probability event. I don't know. I think obviously if you have a player who's aging at some point, the wheels fall off or whatever, but I don't think that's that. I think these are black swan events. You're going from the best tackling team to the second worst. You're going from the best run defense, and then by the way, all of this is magnified by the fact that you can't rush the passer. Matabuke's got an injury that nobody seems to want to talk about the severity of. This is when the wheels fall off, and you just and nothing. And again, I hate this analogy, but it's so I talk about it a lot with the Steelers, right? Airplanes need, I think, 500 things to go wrong to actually crash. 500 things. And if one thing goes right, it stays in the air. A lot of teams are built like that. But sometimes, guess what happens? 500 things go wrong. Maybe where we're at right now. Ravens can't rush the passer, can't stop the run, can't tackle. What are you going to do? Now everybody's hurt. And I guess you could say Roquan Smith's gone from a great run stuffing linebacker to really bad, below average. And so Kelly says, when I said, what are the flaws that came out of nowhere? Listener Kelly says, Nate Wiggins finishes strong last season. Marlon Humphrey has a great 2024. You sign J. Alexander. You draft Starks and Green. Roquan looks sleeker. And all of a sudden, surprise, what came out of nowhere? The Ravens defense is garbage. I would not fire John Harbaugh because I think John Harbaugh, through all of this, has become underrated. He's the one that changed everything about the Ravens organization to empower Lamar Jackson when they drafted him. He's the one that helped install an offense tailored around him that's won multiple MVPs and could have won another one. Okay. He's the one that when things got stale with Greg Roman, which by the way, Roman now has become an underrated figure. Like Roman really helped Lamar Jackson at the beginning, and then somehow everyone started branding him a football terrorist. No, like Roman was good. Things just ran its course. Happens. And then when that happened, he went to the college ranks and got Todd Monken, and they're doing really well and they're putting up historic numbers. But sometimes the wheels fall off the wagon. That's what we have here. And I would not fire John Harbaugh based off that because I think, first of all, if you just stay in the fight, at some point you're going to win a Super Bowl. Like I thought it was going to be this year. It's the reason I picked it. But then beyond that, I just think that the way NFL teams, and listen, people are saying Mike McDonald would have been, that you should have fired John Harbaugh to promote Mike McDonald. Think about how insane that would have been. Coming off a Lamar MVP, coming off a game where you basically like you have one bad playoff game and then you it's a first time head coach. By the way, Mike McDonald still has not reached anywhere close to the heights that John Harbaugh has reached. So there's that. So when you say that I'm mentioning that just to cut off at the head the who would you hire question, because I think people would say you would have promoted Mike McDaniel. Well, you didn't. And by the way, most good programs lose assistants all the time and they're able to replace them. Unfortunately, on the defensive end, it seems like a miss for them. But on the offensive end, you get rid of Greg Roman, you bring in Monken, huge hit, huge hit. They made some mistakes. Yeah, they played the Chiefs. They didn't run into empty boxes enough, or the 6-man boxes, 5-man boxes. They didn't run into them enough. Oops, that to me is not a fireable offense unless you do it 8 times. You did it once. You learn from your mistakes. So I think the big story, the reason I'm saying this is because we're going to hear all week, everyone's going to say, fire John Harbaugh, fire John Harbaugh, fire John Harbaugh. I don't think John Harbaugh is the problem. I think it's bad luck, which I know nobody wants to hear. We're not allowed to attribute anything to luck. We're not allowed to attribute anything in sports to luck. It has to be a reason. If I say, oh man, everybody got hurt at the wrong time, they lost an incredible, they completely lost their heads against Buffalo in a game they should have won, and then things got bad, and now they can't get out of it. Okay? So that's part of it. If they're able to rush the passer, they steal one of those games. If they're able to stop the run, they steal one of those games. And we're talking about a completely different situation. I think this is one of the unluckiest contenders we've had. I mean, the Niners had that last year where everybody gets hurt. Part of that, if I had to guess, is you do have an aging team. So people start to get hurt. Maybe I should be extending the same grace to the Niners from last year as I am to the Ravens now. I didn't. Again, I already told you I'm a tool. But I'm not firing John Harbaugh. By the way, I'm not firing Kyle Shanahan. I don't think you can draw conclusions on either of their tenures. And they have some similarities. Kyle Shanahan obviously is one of the best offensive play callers of his generation. John Harbaugh doesn't even call the offensive plays. But at some point there's going to be a breakthrough for both of them. And I think the firing the coach thing is going to get very, very reductive. And I think it's going to get very reductive this week. All right. Moving on. So I think a lot of people, when I put out the what was your flaw that came out of nowhere question, a lot of people wanted to talk about the Chiefs. And I think all of those flaws, and we'll see with the defense, but I think a lot of those flaws were answered by Xavier Worthy. And Patrick Mahomes said that today was an example, by the way, coming back off injury, was an example of the role they wanted for Xavier Worthy in year 2 until he got injured in Brazil. And just because something doesn't happen immediately doesn't mean it's not going to happen. We finalize our opinions too early in the sport. So today, Xavier Worthy is the leading receiver and the leading rusher. Okay. Mahomes throws for 4 touchdowns for the first time since week 7, 2022, and was dicing up the Ravens on quick passes. Worthy was mostly outside the numbers. It was really cool to see. And I think that the biggest downfall of the Chiefs, and again, they won a Super Bowl in this time period, but to have the lowest average depth of target. in the NFL the last 2 years. It should never happen. What they should be able to do is stretch the field vertically, take the top off the defense, let Mahomes throw what I still think has the capability of the best deep ball in the sport. And I I, I I think we're going to see something. I think the Ravens are done. Ravens done. Chiefs at 2-2. They saved their season today, but it's not because they're 2-2. It's not necessarily a math problem for me. I'll never count out the Chiefs even if they started 0-4. For me, it's more of we saw what Xavier Worthy can be. And once that, like I made the joke last year, I said, because they're coming off the Super Bowl, they get Xavier Worthy. He's the fastest player in the history of combine. I got people texting me from the league saying he's going to, fit him for a gold jacket and any sort of hyperbole you could find it anywhere in front offices, Chiefs or otherwise. And I made the comment, I said, if he's who he can be, if he's who the league thinks he is, if he's who the Chiefs think they are, we need to start a new league. And instead, he doesn't seem to have body control down the field and didn't have the deep ball chemistry. But if this happens really quickly, then the AFC has another contender. And again, we finalize our opinions too early. I thought that when Rashee Rice comes back, you always have Hollywood Brown. Like something really cool can happen here with this Chiefs offense. Really cool. And if you're asking me, is Spags going to get the defense ready? I bet he does. Because Lamar Jackson had not been pressured this much since 2023, week 4 of 2023. Pressured on half of his dropbacks. Completed 4 of 9, his via next gen stats, 4 of 9 attempts when he was pressured for 62 yards and interception. Also got hurt. So there's something I think to be said for what's going on in Kansas City. And in fact, I didn't know I could change my opinion so much. And again, everybody got hurt on Baltimore, but I didn't know I could change my opinion so much of Baltimore of one team in one game than I did Kansas City today. Like that was serious. That was serious stuff. All right, so Malik Neighbors gets hurt for the Giants, but that stinks. I hate it. A couple people said, I said, what's your flaw? MetLife Stadium turf. I got like 5 people saying that. Although, as Mahesh says, you should have seen that coming. Yes, correct. And I saw when Cam Scatterbo did that backflip. Don't do it, buddy. Don't make any sudden moves on the MetLife turf. Don't do it. But here's the deal. What can the Giants do to make Jackson Dart's life easy? You can have a defense that rushes the opposing quarterback and makes you look a lot better. Justin Herbert, pressured on half of his dropbacks. Abdul Carter, 8 pressures. Abdul Carter looks like best player on the team right now. How about this, guys? Jackson Dart, via ESPN, our colleagues, second player since 2000 to have a pass touchdown, rush touchdown, 50 rush yards in a first career start since Tim Tebow. I don't love the Tebow comp. There. But I think there's something to build on here. I don't think the Giants are going to be very good. I don't think this is. But I thought this was an amazing afternoon. It was an amazing afternoon, and if you keep doing these things, you get to keep your job, Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. Because this is all people kept saying to me in the offseason, say, hey, when should Jackson Dart start? And I said, week one, because you have to have a proof of concept that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen deserve to keep their jobs. And I think rushing into that, because if Jackson Dart started on Thanksgiving and then it's 4 games, everyone gets hyped up, they have this sort of game. I want to see what this looks like for an entire season. I want to see what happens when people adjust to Jackson Dart running quarterback draws up the middle, which was a really effective play today. He was really good. And some of the RPO, like some of this stuff, there's a lot there. So what happens when defenses adjust to it and Daboll has to adjust to that? That's what I want to see. I'm really excited for Jackson Dart. I'll say this. He was much better in his first game than I thought he was going to be. And there were some worrying signs in college. Like, and I know this sounds unfair, I bring it up all the time, but like that fourth quarter against Florida where he's doing the Will Levis, begging to throw the same interception thing over and over and over and over again. That to me, slightly disqualifying for a future pro quarterback. But guess what? He looked amazing today. And he exceeded all of my expectations. Having said that, we had the same thing with Daniel Jones in his first start. I think it was in Tampa. Exceeded all my expectations. Sometimes guys do that. And then we have the journey of the quarterback, as Kevin O'Connell likes to say, the quarterback's journey. We got to see how that develops, but there's a box to be checked, and Jackson Dart checked it. 49ers. Tim Peters says the 49ers run game in the red zone has been atrocious this year. Probably something to that. Brock Purdy really struggled when he held on to the ball today. Whether that was the interceptions, whether that was the fumble. Two of those picks were Devin Lloyd. Lloyd was also in the fumble, as was Eric Armstead. Christian McCaffrey, woof. I gotta be honest with you. I don't understand these next gen stats, like completion percentage over expectation, whatever. I only read them and make note of them when they're a complete disaster zone. Christian McCaffrey had negative 34 rushing yards over expected. And now, if I had to guess what that is, it would be that he's the way it was blocked in the open space. He was supposed to have 34 yards more than he actually did. Again, I'm not even sure if that's high or low. I just know it seems really bad. So I'm gonna say Christian McCaffrey can there's some room for improvement there. By the way, I thought the Liam Coen Robert Saleh thing. So if you didn't know what it was, Robert Saleh said Liam Coen has a legal sign stealing system. Also seemed to implicate the Vikings in it. It sounded like. I'm not really sure. I wouldn't have done that. And people and then Kyle Shanahan, they exchange words, Coen and Saleh. Coen doesn't say what he told Saleh. Saleh doesn't speak to the media because he's a coordinator. Kyle Shanahan says that Liam Coen shouldn't be so sensitive. I think that it was okay for Liam Coen to be sensitive. I think you're bringing that up out of nowhere when nobody asked about it to try to get under somebody's skin, and then the Jaguars on the road played a really tough, physical, disciplined game, and you get to talk crap. That's it. You get to talk crap. That is very important. I think Salah was probably a little bit out of line. Just say also the legal stealing thing. It's a it's a gray area, and you're trying to. I'm not sure what you bring it up so you want people to know. Are you trying to say that what they're doing should be illegal? Are you trying to just bring attention to it so they do it less? To me, uh, the reason, just to back up here, the reason the sign stealing thing was a big deal in college is because there was no helmet to helmet communication. There was no quarterback with a communication on the sideline. There was no green dot on the defense with helmet communication. But there still are hand signals and signals from the sidelines and all that sort of stuff that you could steal. College, it's a bigger deal because they were just, with the boards and stuff, and every player would look at the sideline, and then the coach would signal in what it was. So you could literally just decipher all of the offensive plays if you were stealing signs. But there was kind of a boys will be boys thing to it. Auburn and Gus Malzahn was famous for it, I guess. There was also stories that were written up by a lot of journalists with good reputations about Clemson, and then obviously Michigan. And I think there were a lot of sign stealing operations throughout college football. The difference was Michigan went above and beyond the gray area by scouting in person, which is not allowed. That was the actual issue. And then whether or not they were truthful about it. I to be honest with you, once I figured out the NCAA wasn't going to do anything, which was like 4 minutes after it all came out, I decided to just not look into it very much. I know all about like the Stallions operation because it was funny because I was reading about that, but like the actual investigation, I didn't learn much about that once I realized the NCAA was just going to give them a slap on the wrist to move on. So anyway, point being is I'm not even sure what the point of bringing it up is, other than to get a post game war of words to try to get under Liam Cohen's skin. I don't think it worked, or maybe it did, but it just pissed them off. So Kurt says, "Is the Eagles' offensive line really elite? Is that the flaw?" Fantasy Snob says the Eagles' run game is an embarrassment. Well, it's a couple things about that. Number one is the Eagles' offense; they're undefeated. We can't Eagles fans, man. Eagles fans make me laugh. And a lot of it is just the standard that they set and how many players that they have that are good. They can get away with a lot, kind of like what we were talking about with the Giants earlier, and their lack of pass rush with the Ravens. But they can get away with a lot because of how many good players they have to bail them out, and that they can rob Peter to pay Paul if one part of their game is working. So the Eagles generated 40% pressure rate on Baker Mayfield. That's the most they've had since the start of last season. Okay. And remember, they've had a lot of good games as far as that is concerned. But AJ Brown doesn't get the ball. He's posting cryptic stuff on Instagram and cryptic stuff on Twitter. Seems like he's not very happy. Unironically, by the way, he should go back to the Titans and make everybody happy. Sounds like he never wanted to leave. He got his ring. Cam Ward, who's getting the crap knocked out of him, can come back. Or can get a great weapon, and everybody's happy. Maybe they'll have a new coach next year. But the thing with Brown is these guys want to be involved because every single player has an ego, and we overrate how important winning is for a guy. Like, he's already gotten his ring. He wants to be the focal point of the offense. Everybody wants to be the focal point of the offense. Guards want to be the focal point of the offense. There are very, 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 very few truly selfless football players. Very few. And a lot of the guys who say they're selfless are the least selfless. Like, if there's a guy who's like, all I care about is winning, typically it's a red flag and they don't care about winning at all. Right? I've gotten that vibe sometimes. Just guys inside buildings who are a little too doth protest too much about how I only want to win games. Okay, pal. What you'd like is $55 million a year. And if you can win, that's great. But that's kind of a side deal. Okay. I honestly, I'm serious. There's very, very few people who prioritize winning over money in the NFL. It's an absolute fact. And I think you could probably argue against my point by saying AJ Brown has made a lot of money, will make a lot of money, and has a ring, and seem to enjoy it. But everybody wants to be the reason that their team wins. I think that's what people are after. You want to win, and you want to be the reason for that. And that's not an AJ Brown thing. There's 53 guys in a roster. 44 of them, 43 of them probably feel that way. You want to be the reason that your team won. Okay. The only guys, with few exceptions, like the guys who are truly selfless, a lot of the times it's because that's their job description. Is, hey, I'm just going to be the third linebacker, and I'm happy to be here, all that stuff. Very few guys who I don't know. Like, maybe I'm generalizing, but there's going to be a lot of discourse around AJ Brown, and I don't even know AJ Brown. I don't think he's been on any of my shows. I don't really know. I know I read a lot about him. I read his interviews. I watch his interviews. I just think that his points that he's made are more common than you think. He's just voicing them. Just a thought. In that Bucs game, by the way. So first of all, one more point on Brown. The players' goals and the fans' goals are rarely aligned. That's okay. It's when the front office and ownership are not aligned with the fans is when that's a problem. The front office and ownership don't want to win. That's when it's a problem. But anyway, the Bucs. I got Buck Wild says that O-line health and depth for the Bucs is the flaw that came out of nowhere for him. And I just think once Tristan Wirfs gets injured and you're starting to move everything around, and as he says, playing guys they signed 4 days before the game, you lost one of the best players in football. And I think very few people can navigate that. That's how I view that. Like, I think that's Jason Light's an amazing GM. Sometimes it's impossible. There's 53 men on a NFL roster, and there's not a lot of good offensive linemen on Earth. And they're not available on September 28th. So I don't blame. I think that flaw. First of all, the Bucs look good this year. They could have won today. And the special teams mistake. That, again, I saw a good breakdown of this on Twitter. Basically, like, the Eagles stunted in front of I think Sean Syed, I think is his name. They stunted in front of the center, and they got internal pressure, or the long snap rather. They got inside pressure, and they're able to block the kick. Like, I think maybe in the last 3 weeks we're seeing a lot of innovation for whatever reason. I'd love to see a piece on this on special teams and why we're starting to see more blocked kicks, more big returns. I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's possible there's just more great athletes that are being put on kick return. It's possible that nobody's adjusted to the new reality, that it's a little easier, and you exploit a flaw. Remember a couple of years ago when the Seahawks were doing it, how everybody was trying to do the jump over thing, and people don't really do that anymore. There's other schemes to do. So I'm intrigued to see the adjustment on top of that. Quick hitters before we go. Cam Ward says that they're ass right now. I agree. It's looking like they're going to just probably have to fire everybody in Tennessee just to save the rookie quarterback. But 26-0, Texans are able to get something. There was a hit from Al Shahir that he basically just went out of his way to knock Cam Ward with his forearm, maybe both arms. And he's been suspended. He was suspended last year for a dirty hit on Trevor Lawrence. He was fined 7 times before that. I'm not really sure. Like in New York City, if you get a couple parking tickets you don't pay, they put a boot on your car. I'm not sure how many fines would equal a suspension, but apparently it's more than 7 because he wasn't suspended until he hit Trevor Lawrence, which necessitated its own suspension. Maybe they tacked on an extra game. We got suspended for 3 games. He got upheld, all that stuff. It was before the suspension last year, 13 on-field infractions for going over the line, physicality, 7 fines. To me, I don't know how you don't do you're not throwing the book at him every single time he does something like this. No flag on the play. Do you have to be better than Cam Ward to get protected as a quarterback? Because I see a lot of quarterbacks get not overprotected, but protected commensurate in the way the league wants their stars to be protected. Cam Ward gets destroyed, obvious hit to the head, and nothing happens. Cool. Very, very cool. Quick hitters, Commanders. It was funny. I was doing a show with Mike Tannenbaum, and we were talking today about, I was like, they got to get Jaden Daniels back in Washington. He said, you know what? A good backup quarterback just splits the 2 games he plays. Marcus Mariota, the offense didn't look as good as it could have today. The Falcons actually looked a lot better. It's put up 34 points. But if you put it in that context, Marcus Mariota comes in, splits the games he's in. We'll see if Jaden Daniels can play in the next game. But I think that's a good way to look at it. He comes in. You're not supposed to win 4 games in a row. You're not supposed to take anybody's job. You're supposed to split the games. That's the job of a backup quarterback, is to tread water. The Panthers. I got a couple tweets about Dave Canales today about the flaws, and one of them was Dave Canales doesn't have that dog in him, which I don't know if I can confirm or deny. Like that to me, it's a talent thing, right? Like you're losing 42-12 to a 13 to a bad Patriots team. When is the dog supposed to show up? That's a talent thing. That's a Bryce Young thing. That's a couple of years away thing. What do we say about the Panthers rebuild? It's always going to have to take a while. Real quick, I forgot this point on the Chargers. Alex Ferreira, remember, I asked, what's your flaw that came out of nowhere? He said, I thought the amulet of death that haunted the Chargers had been sent out to get repaired. Obviously, Alex was wrong. So that's where we're at. Colts Rams. I saw that on the 88-yard Tutu Atwell touchdown that the Colts only had 10 guys out there, but they're still 3-1. Daniel Jones threw 2 picks, but he's still 24-33, 262 yards. You're losing to a Super Bowl contender in the Rams. I'm good with it, guys. I'm good with it. Sometimes you don't have to have a take on everything. You're going to lose games. Jonathan Taylor, 76 yards. A couple explosives. Matthew Stafford, if you want to be concerned about anything, it's that Matthew Stafford completed all of his deep passes for a lot of yards. But sometimes that happens. And guess who it happens with? Matthew freaking Stafford. All right, we'll be back on Monday. We have a current player coming on this week, and then a media friend who's going to come on Wednesday, who's always a lot of fun. So great episodes coming this week. I think we'll have 2 in total after this one, so 3 this week as normal. Thank you to Miles Patola. This has been football. We will see you this week.